My name is Claire, and the last thing I expected on a Tuesday morning in November was to be standing in a boardroom full of strangers, while my husband told them I was nothing. Not in those exact words. Marcus was always careful with his words in public. There were 14 people in that room. I counted them the way you count ceiling tiles when you're trying not to cry. Methodically, quietly, jaw locked so tight your back teeth ache. 14 people in expensive chairs around a glass table that reflected the city skyline, every one of them watching Marcus gesture at the presentation screen with that easy, practiced confidence I had spent 6 years mistaking for strength. Knoll chairs. I had sourced them myself 3 years earlier. Marcus said to spare no expense on the things people would see first. He did not look at me. Our firm. His firm. A thing I had helped build from a shared desk in our second bedroom, a 6-foot IKEA folding table we never replaced because there was always something more urgent, coffee rings on the lease agreements, my signature on documents he had stopped mentioning 2 years ago. A woman across the table, charcoal blazer, silver earrings, the kind of composed face that takes decades to build, glanced at me. Just for a second. I think she recognized the particular stillness of a woman deciding not to explode. I smiled. I had learned to smile the way you learn to hold your breath underwater. Then Marcus said the thing that cracked the floor open beneath me. He laughed, that warm, disarming laugh that had once made me trust him completely, and looked around the table and said, "Honestly, she never could have survived this industry without the infrastructure we built together. She's talented in her way." He spread his hands at the room, the skyline, the entire implication of everything. Some of them nodded. The man in the Paul Smith suit, second chair from the left, flown in from Singapore that morning, wrote something in a slim moleskine beside his water glass. Slow, deliberate strokes. I stood there with my hands folded in front of me and thought about the folder. There is a folder. Digital. Encrypted with a 17-character password Marcus would never guess. The name of the street I grew up on, combined with the date of the first client contract I had drafted alone, backed up in 3 separate locations, one of which he has never thought to ask about. I had started it 18 months ago, before I fully understood what I was building, back when I still told myself I was only being careful. I had not been careful enough to save the marriage. I had been careful enough to save everything else. That folder contains emails. Contracts bearing my signature, later reissued under the firm's name alone, revision dates preserved in the metadata. Design files, original brand identity work, every iteration, time-stamped from the February I spent 3 consecutive weekends rebuilding our client presentation while Marcus was in Lisbon. Financial records from the early months, when it was just my Dell laptop and a $340 balance and the kind of hope that feels embarrassing to remember. Client correspondence from people who had reached out to me directly, 7 of our top 12 accounts, and been quietly redirected. A paper trail so clean that the lawyer I had shown it to 3 weeks earlier, Diane, $480 an hour, had not billed me for the last 40 minutes of our meeting. She had gone very still and said slowly, "Claire." I understood. Standing on the 42nd floor, watching Marcus accept compliments built entirely on work I had done, I understood everything with a clarity that was almost peaceful. He had always said I was not built for this. Too soft. Too emotional. He said it kindly at first. The way you say something kindly when you want the other person to believe it's for their own good. Later, he said it less kindly. In the last year, he said it the way you say something when you need it to be true, because your entire position depends on the other person staying small. I had stayed small. For longer than I want to admit, I had believed him. But belief doesn't break all at once. It erodes, the way water takes apart stone, slowly, without drama, until one morning you reach for the shape of the thing you used to trust and find only your own hands. My own hands, which had built more than he ever acknowledged, which were now folded quietly in front of me in a room where he had just said every word of that out loud, in front of 14 witnesses, including the man from Singapore, still writing, and called it the truth. He never looked at me when he finished. He just moved to the next slide. I let him. That was the part he would not understand until it was too late, that I had stopped trying to stop him. You don't wrestle the ground out from under someone. You just wait for them to take one step too far, and then you let gravity do the rest. Look at your slide, Marcus. Look at your skyline and your knoll chairs and everything you built on my name. I have the folder. And the man from Singapore just wrote something down. The beginning for me means a Tuesday morning about 4 years before that boardroom. Different Tuesday, smaller room, no skyline, just a fluorescent light that buzzed at a frequency I had stopped noticing. Because you stop noticing the things that wear you down slowly. I was 28. 11 months into Hargrove and Reed, still making $43,000 a year. I know that number exactly because I had written it on a sticky note and pressed it to the inside of my desk drawer, the way you press a bruise to remind yourself it is real. Benefits make up the difference, Margaret in HR said, same face she used when she explained the parking situation. Apologetic, pre-rehearsed, moving on before you could respond. The benefits package was a $4,200 dental plan I had used once for a cleaning. The culture was a ping-pong table on the 14th floor that I had never seen anyone use. The number itself was not the insult. The comparison was. Derek Paulson had been hired 4 months after me. Same role, same job title, same company letterhead. He made $59,000. He told me over lunch one Wednesday, casual as weather, spooning minestrone from a sweet green bowl he'd expensed to a client meeting that hadn't happened. It was unremarkable to him. He had never had to think about why it would be otherwise. Derek was not better at the job. I want to say that plainly, without bitterness making it sound like an excuse, because it is simply a fact I can document, the way I have learned to document everything. He called Patricia Wynn at Meridian Capital Patricia White in 3 consecutive emails before I quietly corrected the contact in our shared CRM. He CC'd the wrong people on sensitive threads and laughed about it in a way that somehow turned the error into charm. He submitted quarterly reports 2 days late every single quarter, and Tom Reeves accepted them with the mild tolerance of a man who had decided in advance that some people are worth the patience. I submitted mine early. I color-coded the supporting data, blue for revenue figures, amber for risk flags, green for action items, because Tom skimmed long documents and I wanted him to find the important sections without effort. I rewrote client-facing proposals that came to me half-finished, including a 22-page pitch deck for the Hollander Group that had Derek's name on the cover slide, and sent them back polished. I stayed until 6:30 most evenings because I believed, with the particular sincerity of someone who has not yet learned better, that the work itself was a kind of argument. It was not an argument anyone was listening to. I have the email. I had not yet understood why I was saving things like that. I told myself I was organized. The chafing was not only about money, though money is honest in a way that other things are not. Tom looked at Derek when he talked, even in meetings where I was the one who had prepared the materials. The senior partners knew Derek's name by his 3rd month. $4 million in January. They called Derek a rising star. They called me reliable. I told myself reliable was not nothing. I kept saving the emails, the September 18th one, the corrected CRM entry with my initials and timestamp, the Hollander draft with my track changes still visible in the margin. I told myself I was saving them because I was organized. I did not yet have a name for what I was actually preparing for. Marcus, by then, was already at the edges of my life, already beginning his long, gentle work of teaching me that my judgment about my own value could not be trusted. He said I was too sensitive when I mentioned Derek's salary. He said office politics were not worth the energy. I heard it as a compliment for longer than I should have. I stayed at Hargrove and Reed because leaving felt like admitting defeat to something I had not yet named. I stayed because Marcus was building something, his app, always his app, the one that was always 6 months from launch, and I believed I was building alongside him. I stayed because I was 28, and I still thought that if you were good enough, visibly and consistently and provably good enough, the people in the room would eventually have to say so. I thought working harder was the same thing as being seen. I was right about one thing, though I didn't understand it yet. The work was an argument. I just had the audience wrong. The emails in that desk drawer, the corrected CRM entries, the Hollander draft with my tracked changes still in the margin, none of it would move Tom Reeves. None of it would make Carl Hargrove remember my name. But documentation has a way of outlasting the rooms it was made in, and those files were already patient in a way I had not yet learned to be. That Tuesday, I still believed the right person, simply hadn't looked closely enough. I was trying to be undeniable inside a system that had already decided what I was. I didn't know yet that the answer wasn't to try harder inside that system. It wouldn't survive the week. The morning it shattered was a Thursday in late October, the 19th, and it started the way disasters often do, quietly, with paperwork. Tom called me into his office at 9:15. Not a calendar invite, not the subject line courtesy he extended to Derek and the senior analysts. Just his head around the partition, wearing an expression I hadn't seen before, rehearsed and uncomfortable, the look of a man reading from a script he didn't write. I brought my notebook out of habit. I think I was still performing the version of myself that believed preparation was protection. Tom's office faced the parking structure. I had always found that quietly telling, the man who decided our fates with a view of concrete and car roofs. He closed the door, sat down, did not offer me the chair. He looked at his desk. He moved a Mont Blanc pen approximately 1 inch to the right. He told me the company was restructuring. He used that word 4 times in 2 minutes, as though repetition could make it feel like weather rather than choice. My role was being eliminated. Certain functions were being consolidated. I had made valuable contributions, delivered with the tone of someone completing a checklist. Tom moved the Mont Blanc back to where it started. I asked what made it different. Derek, 8 months to my 11, whose quarterly numbers I had pulled together every single time because he couldn't work the pivot tables, whose base salary I knew from a misfiled HR email was $94,000 against my $76,500. Derek was apparently a different situation. He said there were various factors involved in the decision. The way you say something when the honest answer isn't available to you. He looked at the parking structure. He did not look at me. I sat with that. My hands were flat on the notebook I had never opened, and I focused on the spiral binding under my right thumb, the small metal teeth of it, because it was real and present and mine. Tom blinked. I had spent 11 months being organized and early and quiet and color-coded, and I think he had come to believe, the way people believe things about women who are good at staying small, that I would absorb this the same way I had absorbed everything else. With professionalism, with grace, with no noise at all. He said he would pass that along to Margaret in HR. Then he stood up, which meant the conversation was over, which meant I was supposed to stand too, which meant this was the end of something I had given nearly a year of real work and real belief to, and I was being handed the door. I walked out. I made it to the single-occupancy restroom near the supply closet and locked the door and pressed my back against it and felt the full weight come down. Not just the job. The pattern. The $16,000 gap. Every meeting where Tom looked past me. Every morning before 8, every evening past 6:30, and every time Marcus had said I wasn't built for this, too soft, too emotional, not the kind of person who plays the game. All of it arriving at once. 75 drip coffee while Derek rolled in at 9 with a $16 oat milk latte from the place on 5th. I cried for exactly 4 minutes. I know because I watched the time on my cracked screen iPhone SE. Not to measure my grief, but because I had a box to pack and a building to leave, and I was not going to give that office the image of my face. 4 minutes. Then I washed my hands. I walked back to my desk. I packed my charger, the sticky note from inside my drawer, the small framed photograph of my mother outside her Bridgeport apartment, and nothing else that wasn't mine. I left the second Moleskine on the desk. I had never once opened it in that office. It felt right to leave it behind. I was in the elevator, doors already closing, when my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Unknown number. No name. 3 words in the preview. We need to talk. The doors shut. I was alone in a 6x8 box dropping toward the lobby, and I had nowhere to be, and someone knew my number, and whatever came next was going to start whether I was ready or not. I did not answer it. Not right away. I stood in the elevator lobby with the box under my arm and the phone buzzing a second time, and I made myself breathe the way you breathe when you are trying to think instead of feel. The doors opened. A man in a gray suit stepped out without looking at me. I stepped in. I rode down 11 floors alone. In the lobby, I set the box on a bench near the revolving doors and took out my phone. The number had a 312 area code. Chicago. I did not know anyone in Chicago. The message read, "We need to talk about Marcus and the Delray accounts. I have documentation. My name is Serena Cho. Please call me." I read it 3 times. Then I called. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was careful, measured, the voice of someone who had rehearsed this conversation and still found it harder than the rehearsal. She said she had worked with Marcus at Delray Financial before he moved to Ohio, before he met me. Junior analyst 2019 to 2021. She had been trying to decide whether to make this call for 4 months. A pause. Then, he did it there too, Claire. With someone else. And when it fell apart, he made sure she took the blame. I watched it happen. I asked what happened to the woman. A longer pause. She lost her license, Serena said. Moved back to her parents' house in Michigan. Last I heard she was teaching bookkeeping at a community college. The lobby tilted slightly. Not literally. But something in the geometry of the room shifted. The way a picture frame looks different once you notice it has been hanging crooked for years. Everything I thought had been a marriage going wrong rearranged itself into something with sharper edges. Something with a shape. She sent it within the hour. I was sitting in my car in the parking garage, level 2, space 47, the space I had used every day for 3 years out of habit, box in the back seat, engine off when the files came through. A forwarded email chain between Marcus and someone named D. Wren. A contract dated March 14, 2021, with Marcus's signature in the blue ink he always used, the Mont Blanc rollerball he kept in his breast pocket like a prop. 2 signed addendums on Delray Financial letterhead. $4 million business insurance policy I had never seen, never been told existed, never been asked to sign. The policy was in both our names. The beneficiary listed was not me. I sat with that for a long time. Then I opened the folder from the filing cabinet in our home office. The one with the combination lock, he said, was for tax documents. I had the combination, 7/14/32, his father's birthday, which he had told me once carelessly. The way you let someone hold a spare key to a door you are certain they will never use. He believed, I understood this now with a clarity that felt like ice water, that I would never actually open it. That I was not, as he had said more than once, with such apparent tenderness, the kind of person who plays the game. He had said it like a compliment. He had meant it as a guarantee. The folder held 3 things I recognized: tax returns, a car title, the deed to the lake house, and 2 I did not. A second insurance document, $800,000, underwritten through a firm in Delaware I had never heard of. And a letter from an attorney in Columbus named Gerald Fitch, referencing a trust established in November 2022. A trust that included assets I had helped generate. My research built those client decks. My projections underwrote those pitches. My calls, returned at 9 in the evening on a track phone, Marcus said we used for overflow because it looked more professional, closed 4 of the 11 accounts that trust now quietly held. My work. My hours. My research, my projections, my calls, all of it, quietly, legally, incrementally, moved somewhere I had not been shown. I photographed every page. Emailed them to myself, then to a second account I had made in college and not thought about in years. Then I forwarded everything to Serena, because she had kept copies once before when she did not know what else to do, and I understood now exactly why that instinct mattered. I sat in the gray afternoon light while the fluorescents on level 2 flickered the way they had flickered for months. Facilities never fixed it, and I felt something happen in my chest that was not grief and was not rage, but was something older and quieter. The sensation of a woman who has just understood the full shape of what was done to her. This was not a marriage that had gone wrong. This was not a man who had stopped loving me, or loved me poorly, or let distance grow, the way distance sometimes grows between people who forget to tend to each other. This was a plan. And I was already written into the ending he had chosen for me. What Serena had sent me, what Gerald Fitch's letter confirmed, what the beneficiary amendment made unmistakably clear, the plan was not finished. He was not just taking what was mine. He was building toward a moment when I would be the one who looked responsible for all of it. The woman in Michigan had been on track to make partner. She had lost her license instead. She had moved back to her parents' house. I was not going to teach bookkeeping at a community college. But if Marcus had already moved to protect the trust, then every hour I spent sitting in this garage was an hour he was still ahead of me, and I had no way of knowing yet how far ahead he already was. I started the engine. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark of the apartment, the one on Halcyon Drive that Marcus had chosen, with the concierge and the underground parking and the monthly fees that cost more than my first year's salary. While the photographs cycled through my mind like a slideshow, I could not close. The beneficiary amendment dated March 4th. The attorney's letter on Whitmore and Crane letterhead. The trust with my work folded invisibly inside it, like a hand I had never been dealt credit for holding. By 3 a.m, I had made a list. Not an emotional list, not a list born of panic, but the kind you make when grief has finished its loudest part and what remains underneath is structure. I had always been good at structure. Marcus had said that too, once. The way he said most things that were true about me, as though competence in a woman were something to be managed rather than celebrated. At the top of the second column, I wrote one name. Ellen Marsh. Ellen was my mother's oldest friend. She had been at our wedding. Blue dress, 3rd row, and afterward she had leaned close and said quietly, "Claire, you call me if you ever need a real lawyer." Not a party trick. At the time, I had laughed. I thought she was being warmly dramatic, the way people are at weddings, full of champagne and small wisdoms they hope you will never need. I was not laughing now. I called her at 7 a.m. She answered on the first ring, which told me something about Ellen Marsh I should have understood years earlier. She said, "Claire." So I talked. Without crying, because I had already used that time in a single-occupancy restroom with fluorescent lights and a broken paper towel dispenser. I laid out every piece of it, the beneficiary amendment, the Delray accounts. 4 of them opened across 11 months, the woman who had come before me and taken the blame. The trust set up in October 2019, 6 weeks before our 3rd anniversary dinner at the kind of restaurant where the menu has no prices. The attorney in Columbus. Marcus's voice, soft as a closed door, saying I was not the kind of person who plays the game. When I finished, there was a silence that was not uncomfortable. The silence of someone taking the full measure of a thing before they speak. I said yes. I said yes. Then do nothing else until we've spoken in person. Do not confront him. Do not move money. Do not say a word. I said I could. We met 2 days later at a coffee shop 3 towns over. Ellen's idea, the distance. 50 drip coffee. She sat across from me in a gray blazer with reading glasses pushed into her silver hair and went through every photograph I had brought, printed at the FedEx on Route 9, organized chronologically as she had asked. She made notes on a yellow legal pad in handwriting so small and precise it looked like code. Something in me that had been holding a particular tension for 11 months, maybe longer, maybe years, released itself by one quiet degree. Ellen brought in a forensic accountant named David Park, who spoke in slow, careful sentences and had the patient eyes of someone who had untangled worse than this. He drove a 12-year-old Camry and carried his notes in a canvas tote from a public library. Together they began tracing the movement of assets, $340,000 shifted across 6 accounts in 3 states over 4 years, building what Ellen called, without drama, a file. Serena sent a formal statement. She had been waiting to send it to someone she trusted. After their call, Ellen texted me 2 words: she's solid. I kept going into the apartment every evening, setting my bag by the door, making dinner on the sub-zero range. Marcus had special ordered from a showroom in the city, saying the ordinary things. I kept my voice level. I kept my face familiar. Marcus did not know about Ellen. He did not know about Serena or about David Park, and the 3 weeks he had spent following a trail of numbers that led back, again and again, to the same quiet theft conducted over the same quiet years. He did not know that the attorney in Columbus had already been identified and flagged. He did not know that the 4-digit combination on the filing cabinet had given up its contents to someone who had taken her time. Every piece was in place. Ellen had the file. David had the accounting. Serena had her statement. And I had the one thing Marcus had never once thought to account for. I had been paying attention the entire time. I was still sitting with that thought, almost allowing myself to feel something close to steady, when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. A Columbus area code. The text said only, "We need to talk before you make your next move. There are things about the trust you haven't found yet." I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the counter and stood very still in the kitchen of the apartment on Halcyon Drive, beside the sub-zero range Marcus had special ordered, and understood that what I had believed was the end of the preparation was not the end at all. Someone else knew, and they had found me first. The meeting had been scheduled for 2 weeks. Marcus had called it himself, a quarterly review with the firm's senior partners, the kind of room where reputations were confirmed or quietly ended. He had told me about it over dinner at Maison Noire, casual as weather, the way he told me things he wanted me to know only partially. 2 million across 18 months, the numbers he had recited to me 100 times in the kitchen of the Riverside Drive apartment, while I cross-checked the client spreadsheets on my second-hand Dell. He said it would be a formality. He had invited me because I was, as he put it to the partners in the email I was CC'd on, without his knowledge of what I now carried, the woman who had provided administrative support during the build phase. Administrative support. I read that phrase twice. Then I printed the email on the $40 inkjet I kept on a folding table in my studio on West 143rd and added it to the file. I wore the navy blazer that morning, bought 3 years earlier at a Banana Republic sale rack for $68, dry cleaned twice since. Not for him. For me, because there is a version of yourself you dress toward on the days that matter, and that morning I chose the version who had been awake since 5, who had eaten a real breakfast, who had driven 40 minutes in gray early light with Ellen's voice in her ear one final time. She had said, "You don't need to perform anger." And, "Claire, you walk in there knowing what they don't know you know." The conference room was on the 14th floor, a long glass box with a view of the city I had once found beautiful. 6 people seated. Marcus at the near end of the table, in the Brioni suit he kept for client meetings. The charcoal one that cost more than my monthly rent. He looked up when I walked in and his expression did the small thing it always did, a flicker of reassessment, a recalibration of how much space I was taking up, and then he smiled the smile I had once believed was warmth. Gerald Howe, a senior partner who had known Marcus for a decade, gestured toward the seat beside Marcus and said pleasantly, "Claire, good of you to join us." Support staff. There it was again. I sat down. I set my bag, the $34 canvas tote Marcus had once suggested I replace before a client lunch, on the floor. I placed the folder on the table in front of me, folded my hands over it, and did not open it yet. Marcus began. He spoke well. He had always spoken well, that particular fluency that fills a room without saying anything that can later be held against you. He walked the partners through the Delray numbers, the growth trajectory, the projected returns on Henderson and Callaway, and 4 others whose files I had personally organized in the shared drive he no longer had access to. He used the word "we" liberally. He did not once specify what we meant. Gerald Howe was nodding. Someone across the table was writing. I kept my hands on the folder. I let him finish. That part mattered. Letting him finish. Letting the room settle into his version of events. Letting every person at that table believe, for 30 more seconds, that they understood what kind of meeting this was. Ellen had been clear about that too. Don't interrupt his performance. Let him close the door himself. Then Marcus looked at me, and something shifted in his face. A kind of amusement, private and familiar, the expression of a man who has just remembered he is the smartest person in the room. He said, Claire was helpful with some of the background research, of course. The early stage stuff. She has a good eye for detail, even if the strategic vision was a bit beyond. He stopped because the room had already begun changing. I had opened the folder. My voice was even, not flat, not cold, but even, the way a table is even, the way a foundation is even. I had practiced the evenness for weeks without knowing I was practicing it. I slid copies to each person at the table. The beneficiary amendment, dated March 14th, notarized in Franklin County. The attorney's letter from Columbus. David Park's accounting summary, 3 pages, $310,000 in 7 transfers between February and August, each one logged with the patience of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to show. And behind those, Serena Cho's statement, 2 pages, careful and quiet, the last thing I placed on the table. The room went quiet. Not the polite quiet of people waiting for someone to finish. The other kind. The kind that has weight. Gerald picked up the first sheet. Read it. Put it down and picked up the second. His face did not change exactly, but something behind it did. Marcus said my name. He said it the way he used to when he wanted me to understand I was misreading a situation, that I was being, as he so often suggested with such patient disappointment, too much. Claire, I think you might be confused about the context of some of. The trust was established 14 months ago on September 9th. The assets transferred include revenue directly traceable to the Henderson and Callaway accounts I built from initial outreach. David Park's report documents all 7 transfers. Silence. Then Marcus leaned toward me, lowered his voice to the register he used when he was certain no one else could hear, and said, You wouldn't do this. You don't survive this kind of room. You never have. For a moment I felt it, the old pull of that voice, the reflex that had taken me 3 years to name and another year to stop obeying. The part of me that had once rearranged itself to fit the shape he preferred. I let it pass. It passed quickly. I looked at him. I let the silence hold 1 beat longer than was comfortable. I turned back to Gerald Howe. You're right. I watched Gerald set down the final page. Serena Cho's statement, the last thing he read. I watched him look at Marcus. I watched the room understand, one person at a time, what had just happened in it. And I watched Marcus's face do something I had never seen it do before. Go still. Not the stillness of composure, but the stillness of a man who has just realized the room he built his reputation in is the same room it will be taken apart. I had not come here to perform anger or triumph or anything at all. I had come here with a folder and a voice that did not shake. I had come here because the work was real, and the record was real, and I had spent long enough being the kind of woman who made things possible for men who made sure no one would ask. The folder was open on the table. The room was quiet. That was enough. I did not wait to see what happened next in that room. I had placed every document on that table with my own 2 hands, and what came after belonged to the room itself, to Gerald Howe and the partners and the slow-grinding machinery of consequence. I picked up my bag, the same worn black canvas totes Marcus had once called embarrassing in front of a room full of people, thanked the room in a voice that surprised even me with its steadiness, and I walked out. The elevator doors closed behind me. 14 floors, alone in that small moving box. I did not cry, did not shake, did not do any of the things I had privately imagined doing in that moment. I just stood there, breathing, looking at my own reflection in the brushed metal doors, a woman in a $34 consignment shop blazer, hands loose at her sides, eyes clear. I thought, so this is what the other side feels like. Quieter than I expected. and somehow exactly right. The weeks that followed were not triumphant in the way movies promise. Gerald Howe's firm retained outside counsel by the second Tuesday. There were calls with Ellen, documents I initialed, questions I answered, and long Wednesday afternoons in the office of a mediator named Diane, who kept a ceramic bowl of peppermints on her desk and spoke to both sides as though resolution were simply a matter of patient arithmetic. Marcus, in those meetings, was not the version of himself I had feared for so long. He was smaller, not broken, not remorseful, but smaller, the way a thing becomes when the architecture it built itself inside is removed. He arrived each time in the charcoal Hugo Boss suit he wore when he needed to feel formidable. It did not do for him what it once had. That was all I gave him. Not anger, not satisfaction. Just acknowledgement, the cleanest and most final thing I had available. The financial settlement was, by Ellen's measure, a strong outcome, the kind of number she had hoped for but not counted on when we first sat down together in November. David Park's documentation had been meticulous enough that disputing it would have cost Marcus more than accepting it. Serena's statement did what Ellen always suspected it would, established a pattern, gave the isolated details a shape that was harder to dismiss. Marcus resigned before the firm's internal review completed. A choice, Ellen said, without editorial, that people make when they have calculated their odds. I moved into a different apartment that spring. 20 minutes north on the 43 bus, still the same city, still the same gray early mornings I had learned to love. Larger windows. A small balcony where I put a second-hand chair I found on the sidewalk on a Saturday and a pothos I had not yet killed. The rent was $340 more. It did not matter the way it once would have. I kept my job. I kept the work. I kept the clients whose trust I had earned one careful email at a time. 3 of them increased their engagement in the 6 months after the review became, as these things do in small professional circles, quietly known. The worn black canvas tote, the embarrassing one, I kept that too. I carry it still. I did not tell this story loudly. I am telling it now to you, because there is a version that goes untold. The one where no one walks into the room, where the folder stays in the bag, where the woman who was told she could not survive goes home and decides once more to believe it. I am not telling you this so you will be angry on my behalf. I passed through anger a long time ago, in the dark of my apartment at 2 a.m, laptop open, $4 gas station coffee gone cold, the numbers slowly revealing themselves like something I had already known. What I want you to understand, the thing I carried out of that 14th floor conference room and into the life I rebuilt, is this. The people who tell you that you are nothing without them are almost never describing your limitations. They are describing their own terror. They are describing what they need you to believe in order for their version of the story to hold together. Marcus needed me small so that he could be large. That was the whole architecture. And when I refused to be small anymore, there was nothing left for him to stand on. I am Claire. I am 31 years old. I have a balcony with 1 chair and a pothos that is, against all reasonable expectation, still alive. I did not survive without him. I built without him. And those are not the same thing. If any part of this story lived somewhere in you, if you have heard those words, in that voice, from someone you once trusted, I want you to know, the folder can be built. The room can be walked into. The voice can be steady, even when everything in you is shaking. You are not too much. You were never too little. You were just in the wrong room.